I always come back to kind of the base reality of Bitcoin and how it operates, because this is what makes it so powerful. This is also like the fact that all you need is a private key to receive and spend funds is like the consequence of that is that you can have your money in your head. And generate a private key. It doesn't matter if you do it alone on the toilet or you use a hardware wallet or whatever. It doesn't really matter. As long as it's random, as long as the entropy is good, you're fine. And then you can convert it to like 12 or 24 words. And you can actually remember 12 words. Like that's doable, especially if you're in a situation where you have to flee your country or what have you, then putting 12 words in your head, you can actually do it. And this works because of the base reality of Bitcoin, of how it operates. But there are situations where people did this and where people are doing this. And this is so powerful, it boggles the mind. And it all comes back to the fact of Bitcoin's operation, and that Bitcoin is pure information and that the private key is pure information. That's why you can transform it to 12 words, and then you have it in your head. And it's literally, this is the money, like it's not like you're log into a bank account or whatever. It's like the value itself is in these bits of information. And it's not even a math problem, really, like it's oftentimes in the mainstream media, you see that Bitcoin miners, they solve complicated math problems. No, that's not what they're doing. They're trying to find a very specific number, like a set of numbers is valid. And the search space is so large that you have to roll the dice so many times, like the chance is so minuscule that you find this number, that all they're doing is guessing. It's not complicated. It's not complicated at all. They're just trying to find the right number. And that's also why cryptography favors the defender and favors the individual. If you use strong cryptography to defend yourself, it doesn't matter if all the armies in the world conspire against you. Like if China and the US and Russia conspire against you, they won't be able to break strong cryptography. They won't be able to get to your secret. They won't be able to get the 12 words out of your head, for example, and that's why it empowers the individual. And that's why I think it's so beautiful, because it will always be like this. This is how Bitcoin operates. And there is no way of changing that. Like this will never change. This is now a truth that exists in the universe. This is now a given fact. And if you know about this, you can make use of it. And that's why I think it's so insanely beautiful and so empowering for so many people. The problem with Bitcoin is that it does like 5 or 6 impossible things before breakfast, like it does it all at once. So I think this analogy is correct. And what it does, it uses stranded energy to protect the information of everyone. Like if a new block is mined, it's an accumulative layer of protection on the whole UTXO side of the world, on everyone's wallet, on everyone's public information. Because the way it works is we have this public ledger, and it records basically who owes what to who. And if you have a private key, you can move some of the funds in this public ledger. And like take everything I say with a grain of salt. Like technically it's a bit different, but that's how you can visualize it. Technically it's a bit different because nothing ever really moves, like messages are signed and so on and so forth. Like you cannot move information really. You can only copy information. This is a very important point, because this is at the core of the double spend problem. Like you cannot, I cannot have information in my head and move it to your head. I will always remember the information. The speaker retains the information. That's the core of the double spend problem. But yeah, that's what Bitcoin does. It uses this energy because you need a protective layer around the publicly available information, which is Bitcoin's proof of work. Proof of work does many other things as well, but it also protects the integrity of the public information. And that's the only way how you can protect public information without private information. The other way would be to encrypt something or to sign something, and then you need a private key for it. And so the only way to trustlessly secure the integrity of public information is by more public information that everyone can verify. And you cannot do it with private information, because then that would imply a private key holder, and we don't want to have that. Like then you would have central banks again that can decide what is true and what is not true. And so Bitcoin uses this energy, as you say, and it organizes it. It organizes it about around the very valuable information that we all value. It is a record of what happened in the system, a record of who owes what to whom, and it protects, like, accumulatively the past of all these transactions. And that's why what I also wrote in Bitcoin is Time, like the way you can think about Bitcoin from this perspective is that Bitcoin creates its own arrow of time, because in the digital realm, you don't have a trustless arrow of time, like you will always have to refer to an external input that will tell you the time. Look at a piece of paper and let the piece of paper tell you how late it is. It's an impossible problem. You need an external source, and you need to feed it into the system. And this external source can always lie. And that's the problem. Like there is a disconnect between what is written on the piece of paper and what is happening in the real world, so to speak. So that's why I say the map is not the territory, like the map of something is not the thing in itself. That's also why, bananas on the blockchain will never work. The bananas rot in the warehouse, and what happens to the data? Like what happens to your sheet of paper? Don't think about it as a blockchain. Think, like you have a sheet of paper and you draw a banana for every banana that's in the warehouse. And then like you wait half a year, and then does the sheet magically update itself? No, it doesn't. Like there is no link between the informational realm and the physical realm. And Bitcoin is, like, proof of work is the only thing that works, that creates this link in a probabilistic fashion, because it creates information that speaks for itself. And that's like information that speaks for itself. You can look at this, you can look at just the information, and you can infer what happened in the real world, what had to happen. This is such an unlikely event. Like this had to happen multiple times, probably. If it didn't happen multiple times, then someone was just very, 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 very lucky. But usually people are not that lucky. So he was probably sitting there and doing this for like 5 hours or whatnot, depending on how many dice he rolls, at once. And this is how Bitcoin mining works, like Bitcoin miners, they find this random number that in a process, in a game that you can't cheat. And then they announce, Yahtzee, I found this number, and it fits the difficulty target and so on. And everyone is like, okay, like, yeah, this guy won. And we all have to work on the next round now, because, there's something to win. Like the Bitcoin network will reward you in good sats, in good hard Bitcoin, for the work that you're doing, for participating in building up this arrow of time, and also for participating in providing energy for this productive layer around Bitcoin. I think Lightning is still very underappreciated. I think everything that's happening around podcasting 2.0 and the work Adam Curry is doing, and just direct peer-to-peer micropayments and streaming money and authentication layers, those kind of things, I think all of it is very underutilized and underappreciated. I think it's insanely magical. Like we call it magic internet money for a reason. And it's if you're playing around with this stuff, and if it works, caveat emptor, early days, like payments still fail, Lightning is not perfect, Bitcoin is not perfect, and so on. But it's improving at such a rapid pace. And if you're listening to this in a podcasting 2.0 app, like you can stream sats right now. If it's not hard to set this up on either side, and this is insanely magical. And I think it's still, a lot of people are sleeping on this. Like the fact that this exists is amazing. And I think it has the power to disrupt advertisement models. I think it has the power to create whole new spaces in cyberspace that can kind of work and monetize themselves. And I think all of it is very kind of underappreciated still. Their own, and intuitively it was very similar, you know, like when email came around for the first time, most people were just still using fax machines for the longest time, you know, even though something way superior was here, they just didn't see the need and they didn't figure it out. And so I think this transition will take longer than the technological maturity will take. Bitcoin, like it eats up this unorganized entropy, it eats up all this stranded energy, and it does something useful with it. And Bitcoin is the perfect fit because it is the buy of last resort when it comes to energy. You know, like Bitcoin mining is very unique in its energy load profile. You know, like you can switch it on and off at a whim. Bitcoin mining is progressless, so you don't need to power it up or power it down. Like, not really. You know, it's not like aluminum smelting or what have you, or other things that were eating up stranded energy before Bitcoin came along. It will disrupt, yeah, basically all of the energy sector in the next like 10 or 20 years, and it will take some time for the energy people to realize this as well.
I think
it's also a slow process, I think, because, you know, like you don't change your mind on Bitcoin overnight. And I think, you know, I think in general, the market will sort this out, like in the sense of what makes sense to wrap into Bitcoin, so to speak, and what makes sense to kind of build on top of Lightning or not. And there are currently different views of how Bitcoin should be utilized, and I think it depends on your view of the world and your use case. Like how do you use Bitcoin, basically? And we see this in the larger picture as well. You know, like if you're mining, you have a different use for Bitcoin than if you're playing around with podcasting 2.0 online. You know, and like the free market will be the jury when it comes to that, because in the end block space is scarce, and, you know, like the fees will come, don't worry about it, like and the use cases that do not make sense will be priced out, basically. So that's my very high level take on it. The value proposition of Bitcoin is to have no central authority and no central point of failure. And with a tokenization, you always reintroduce centralization, because if you tokenize something, you know, like if it's shares of a company or whatever, there is a company. It is a central thing that we're back to bananas on a blockchain in a sense, you know. Like Bitcoin is very inefficient. It's only efficient if you look at it from a like resilience, survival at every cost, decentralization perspective, you know. Like the reason why Bitcoin works the way it works is because with money you can't trust anyone, you know. Like it's a purely adversarial environment, basically. That there are ways to upgrade this that don't require a blockchain, because a blockchain has a very specific use, and the reason why Bitcoin operates in such a stupid way, excuse my language, is because of the constraints of money, and that you can't trust anyone, and everyone wants to cheat all the time, and you like, it's a purely adversarial environment, and you have no central point, period. For example, the reason why Bitcoin is free floating is because if it would have, like if it would be a stable coin, for example, or if it would be backed by gold or whatever, you reintroduce a central party. The reason why Bitcoin builds its own arrow of time, and we have to do all these like weird chains of blocks and so on, is because like you introducing a time server, a time stamping server, reintroduces centralization. Then you have like 2 or 3 time servers of the world that you need to have to trust, and we want to move away from that. And the reason why we have the difficulty adjustment is because we don't know how computation develops. Like the computers get faster and faster and faster every time. We don't know how many people mine, and there is no central authority that registers the miners and tells you like this is the hash rate we need. And that's why we have the difficulty adjustment, because then it can adjust itself organically. Like Szabo tried to solve, and it's called the cryptanalytic stability. There is no mathematical puzzle that is stable in computation time, like because you don't know like one compute cycle, how long it takes in the real world, because you don't know how fast the computer actually is. You don't know if it's a very old computer or an ASIC or what have you. That's why with computer games, if you emulate them, they sometimes run very, very fast, like you have to do some trickery to slow it down because like that's there is a reason why Bitcoin works the way it works, and it's I don't believe really in this tokenization stuff. You can do it, and it might be more efficient than the current things and so on. But that's not why Bitcoin was built, and that's not why Bitcoin was built in the way it was built. Like proof of stake is basically a scam. Period. Like it does not work. It cannot work. Just in terms of timing, proof of stake systems always need to do some proof of work in secret to fight off these race conditions and so on. Like, okay. Either they're doing some proof of work secretly, just a little bit, so as an anti-cheat mechanism, or they have a centralized timing server. There is no other way. There is no global time on Earth. There is no global time in the universe. There just isn't, because of relativity. So a light signal takes like 50 milliseconds to travel from one place of the Earth to the other. And that's not like an arbitrary, like so there is no global state, like you cannot snap with your finger and decide this is the global state of the world. Like a 50 millisecond fuzzy period where it's indeterminate. You cannot, like, signals need to travel back and forth. There is no global state in the universe, and there is no global state on Earth. And so if you reduce the block time to lower than 50 milliseconds, for example, it would be absolutely impossible to find consensus. And that's also why chains that have slower, shorter block times, they have more orphan blocks, because like the risk of running into consensus problems is higher. And Bitcoin's 10 minutes is just like, okay, that's good enough. Even if you have latency issues and so on, 10 minutes is long enough for the Earth to agree on a state. And this is like a physical problem. And proof of stake cannot solve this problem, period. You need to have timestamp servers that are centralized, 2 or 3 of them, that tell you the time, because for transactions and an order of transactions, you need to know the time, because otherwise you would be able to spend money that you do not have. You would be able to spend money that did not arrive yet. For consensus to arise, you need an absolute order of events. And in the universe, there is no absolute order of events. It's all relative. And that's why you kind of need to build up your own arrow of time and so on. And proof of work is the only thing that works. All right, that's one thing. That's just the time aspect. With the proof of stake, one of the biggest problems that Bitcoin solved was who gets the tokens? Who gets the initial supply? How do you distribute the money? First of all, who is allowed to print the money, and how do you distribute it? How does proof of stake solve it? Who decides who can print? Who decides about the money supply and who gets it, Are you aware of the term stake grinding and validator selection and all those kind of things?
I've heard some of it through the Ethereum.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
You know what solves this? Proof of work. Like if you're a validator, or if you control most validators, you are the one who selects the next validator. So who gets the money next? And if you control all of it, then you just give yourself the next slot. and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. And the systems that run into that, how do you know how they solve it? Most of the time with something that's truly random, which is proof of work. You know, like it's all stupid. Like your proof of stake shitcoin token that you mined yourself or pre-mined yourself. Most people don't know Ethereum had a 70% pre-mine, 70% pre-mine. Very few people, like 5 or 6 people, have had 70% of the Ethereum supply before it launched, you know? And all the other projects are very similar, you know? Like there's always a few select people that print the money, because it's a hard problem. How do you generate money fairly and distribute it across the earth, just like gold was distributed, you know, distributed fairly all around the earth without anyone deciding who gets the money? It's a really, really hard problem. And Satoshi solved it, and he didn't take anything for himself, and he disappeared. And that's why Bitcoin can't be repeated, you know, like it's the immaculate conception of sound money. So why do people continue to like improve upon that, and they don't even know the problems the proof of work solves. That's the thing. The proof of stake people have no idea what kind of problems proof of work solves, and so they're not even understanding the problem correctly, and they are trying to come up with a solution, and all the solutions are flawed. And you always, as I said in the beginning, you always have a certain quorum of people that decide what the truth is. In summary, in like one sentence, proof of work relies on physics to tell you what is true, and proof of stake relies on human judgment, and I will tell you what is true. And that's the big difference. And we want to move away from human judgment, and we want to remove humans from the equation when it comes to the very moral and ethical question of money production and who can control the monetary flows. We have to remove humans from the equation, and proof of stake does not remove the humans from the equation, it reintroduces them. It's a moral and ethical question. Who should be able to print the money, and who should be able to deplatform you? Who can stop the money flows? Who can freeze the accounts? Who says what is true and what is not? And Bitcoin and proof of work, it uses physics and mathematics, and something you cannot cheat. And that's why, you know, like that's why these systems, they pause and they restart, and they change the monetary supply, and they blacklist people and deplatform people and blah, 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 blah. We're back to the old system. Proof of stake is the system, the central bank system that we currently have. And it's immoral, it's unethical. And proof of work is a safe and secure and fair system that is based in reality, that is based in mathematics, that is based in physics itself, and it actually solves these problems all the other people try to solve. You know, Bitcoin is the first cybernetic form of life, the first cybernetic organism, because it keeps itself alive, and it pays us to keep it alive. You know, Bitcoin pays miners to keep it alive, and it's all about the internal structure. And of course, the internal structure of Bitcoin is data. But you still need someone to keep the data intact and alive and find it useful enough to pass it around. And we saw it, like one of the best examples was the mining exodus in China. You know, like 50% of the hash rate gone from the network. Or I don't even know how much it was, like 50 or 60%, something like that. And it recovered like without missing a beat, you know. The heart rate of the Bitcoin network, as we said before, is like 10 minutes approximately, and approximately every 10 minutes a new block came in. And very organically, you know, like all the cells of this organism, of this worldwide organism, they found another jurisdiction. they moved there, they reassembled themselves, and the hash rate came back online. You know, like the most ASICs were not destroyed. Like they just. And so I think the life metaphor, the metaphor of an organism is a very apt one. And again, coming back to Ralph Merkel, he said the same thing. You know, he was like, if nuclear war destroyed half of the planet, Bitcoin would march on unhindered. You know, it's like he understood very deeply how this system operates, and you only need a couple of people mining, and the difficulty adjustment will do the rest. Solves the Byzantine generalist problem, but it solves it in this roundabout, weird, probabilistic way, where you create this piece of information and you can all agree on the truthfulness of this piece of information. And the reason why you can do it is because you have these absolute things that behave like timestamps, and you can map them to our time in Bitcoin, because again, like a block comes in every 10 minutes approximately, you know. And so the way I explain it in Bitcoin is time is like every clock, even like it doesn't matter if you take a grandfather's clock or like one that uses cesium, or one that uses like the atomic clocks and so on. You always have something that swings and something that produces a tick, you know, like a tick tock of a clock. And Bitcoin does the same thing. It's just that every tick is one block. That's not what this is about. It's about building up a purely informational construct, something that is just information that creates an arrow of time, where everyone can agree, this is what happened first, and this is what happened next, and this is what happened next, and no one was able to modify this information. No one was able to mess with this information. And this is why in Bitcoin, every single block is linked. And every that's why we call it the blockchain. It's chained together, it's linked. And every block header contains the hash of the previous block. And what this means is that every single block speaks for the entirety of the Bitcoin network. And that's how Bitcoin solves the coordination problem, the Byzantine's general problem, and all that jazz. And it has to do it via timestamping. You need to have an absolute measure of time, in the sense that A came before B, came before C, and so on. And this is what Bitcoin does. And this is what only Bitcoin can do in a trustless manner. If you don't use proof of work, and if you don't use Adam Gibson's term, the reification of information, that information speaks for itself. Information itself behaves like a physical, tangible thing, or like Hugo Nguyen put it. With proof of work, we give blocks weight. You know, we give them real physical weight, and they behave like physical things. Without that, you will always fall back to just trust us. No, we want to move away from this. You know, like you need something else. You need something physical. You need something real. You need something that's independently verifiable. You just look at it and you know it's there, and this is what happened. That's why also people, when writing about proof of work some years ago, they used the pyramids as an example. You know, like the Egyptian pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Giza, it's not proof of stake. Like you can verify yourself that this is there, and it took a lot of work for it to be there. And this is also how Bitcoin works. You just look at it and you know, all right, something had to happen in the real world for this to exist. Like, that's also why Bitcoin is not fiat money. It just is not. It is a very real money. It is very much like gold, but it's way, way better than gold. You can teleport it. You can store it in your head and so on. I mean, everyone knows that by now. But it is not fiat money. And Bitcoin was created by Satoshi in the mathematical space, and miners are just digging it out. But we know from the very beginning, from the Genesis block, 21 million, never more. And Bitcoin is already defined. You know, we are just kind of, we're discovering it, just like gold. You know, like gold doesn't grow underground. It's there. and miners are digging it out. And the same is true for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is defined in a mathematical space. And that's also like, that's one of the main misconceptions people have about mining. You do not create Bitcoin by transmuting energy into Bitcoin. That's not how it works, because otherwise, if we would link money to energy, then if we would get way better at producing energy, we would automatically create more money. You know, if you have a fusion reactor, you have a money printer. Like that's not a good idea. So Satoshi fixed the supply schedule in time. You know, we know exactly how much Bitcoin will exist, and it's already predefined. It's predefined in time, and miners are digging it out of the mathematical space. And that's why we can say with certainty, like with certainty, approximately in the year 2140, all the Bitcoins will be mined. And like Bitcoin mining does not waste energy or so. Like you're not using the energy to mine Bitcoin. The energy is there for something else. The energy is there to solve the coordination problem. The energy is there to build this protective layer around the records of everyone. The energy is there so you produce something that is real and something that you cannot cheat. The energy is there because Bitcoin has to be physical money and not political money. We want to move away from political money where people make decisions. It has to be physical, and proof of work makes it physical.
Proof of stake should be called "Just Trust Me, Bro," because that's what it is. Like, absolutely, no. I'm not kidding. It's 100% true. You know, it's like someone makes up some bullshit, something completely untethered from reality, no proof whatsoever that this is what actually happened, and it's just like, yeah, trust me, I signed off on it with my private. The problem about this all is to understand what I'm saying and to understand how flawed proof of stake is, you have to understand proof of work first, and you have to deeply understand it. And then it becomes obvious why proof of stake is so terrible.
God, that's such a...
I really agree. I think pretty much everyone, I would say pretty much everyone who works on proof of stake systems, like the people that are trying to solve these problems, they don't even know the magnitude of the problems that they have to solve, that they are actually trying to solve. They don't know. They don't know the magnitude of the problems that Bitcoin solved, and Bitcoin solved it with a difficulty adjusted proof of work mechanism. And I would even go so far to say that some of the problems that Bitcoin solves, and it's related to timing, for example, and also there are many ways of how you can describe it. You can also call it the Byzantine generous problem and so on. Mm-hmm. It's an impossible problem to solve. And just engineering types in general, at first glance, they think proof of work is terribly inefficient, and there has to be a better way. And that's why a lot of coders and so on, they go to some smart contract shitcoin that seems more interesting, and they don't realize the profundity of the problem that proof of work solves. And so money describes who owes what to whom, you know, and how much money you have says something about how many goods and services our society owes you. So you got your hands on some money. Right. How you got your hands on the money doesn't matter, you know, like doesn't matter at all. But if you have a lot of money, you obviously, or someone of your ancestry did something amazing in the past, and you have a lot of wealth, and you can, from the market, get goods and services for it. So it's always about who owes what to whom, even if you just have money and hold it, you know, like society owes you something. And if you just look at, you know, your bank statements and so on, it's obvious that, you know, this much was owed to someone, and with the transfer of money, you settle it. And that's one of the things that people don't realize, especially in the fiat world. You know, money is always about final settlement. You only need money if people don't trust each other in the first place. If you trust someone fully, for example, a family member, you don't need money. if you're doing business with someone that you trust fully and you can always come back to that person and so on, you'll figure it out differently. So money is only important for people that don't trust each other in the first place. They don't trust each other fully. And what money does is it does final settlement. That's the important part of money. Everything else is credit, money, because of money, we're able to scale through these trust barriers. So money scales society. All systems that are all systems, period, that are large enough have something like money. So without money, society cannot scale at all. And this is why, with tribes that do not use money, the maximum size is something like 150 people, because then you can still have all these credit relationships in your head. Because historically, to keep track of who has what to whom, we have either clay tablets, which are ledgers, or tokens, physical tokens. So digital tokens do not exist. Like, that's a misnomer. So physical objects that can pass around from person to person. So it's either gold coins or shells or bones, or again, back to an if you have the gold coin, you don't need to ask someone else, like
they're inherently decentralized, you could say.
Exactly. Yes. And they also they take care of their position in space-time themselves. A gold token, so a gold transaction cannot go back in time or something. Like, that's really important to understand. Yeah, physics. Allow me to go one abstraction layer higher. So if you view gold coins as a form of a ledger, it's physics that takes care of the integrity of the ledger. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like,
yes, exactly.
The gold coins themselves keep care. Physics itself keeps care of the integrity of the spatial and temporal distribution of the money of the ledger and so on. Everything has this, because you can't cheat physics. We only have the only forms of money that can exist is a physical instantiation, and then you use the laws of physics to ensure the integrity, or a digital representation, which is a ledger. And by digital, I mean just information, because the clay tablet, it's not about the clay tablet itself, it's about the markings on the clay tablet. And this is where the disconnect comes in between the physical world and the informational realm. And that's the first thing you really have to understand. Like, I cannot spend a gold coin that I don't have in my hands. Like, it's done by physics, period. If you move to a ledger, if you move to the informational realm, to the digital world, so to speak, the order becomes insanely important, because all you have is a list of, some gold coins moved from A to B and then from B to C and so on. And if the order is messed up, everything is messed up, because suddenly you're creating money out of thin air. So the order of events is insanely important. Someone got money, that has to happen first, and then this person gave the money to someone else, and so on and so forth. And that's where time comes in, because the problem that Bitcoin solved is that on Earth, there is no central time. In the universe, there is no central time. So telling time in a completely decentralized system is basically impossible. Bitcoin solved it in this very weird, roundabout, practical way. But it's literally retarded to work on proof of stake, because proof of stake is automatically centralized just because of time alone, and that's only one piece of the puzzle. The way I summed it up is the tokens, physical tokens like gold coins, tokens are timeless and ledgers are not. Ledgers require time, because ledgers require an absolute order of things. So to speak, the thing about gold coins, why tokens are important, physical tokens, is you cannot copy them. You cannot copy them. That's it. That's why they are important. That's why they are good money. And so once something becomes information, you can copy paste it always. And that's why information never was good money up to Bitcoin, because of these problems. And that's why you can't have tokens in the informational realm. You can't have the difficulty adjusted proof of work mechanism. That's the glue that holds everything together, and that's the genius of Satoshi, kind of. And he used it for multiple things. First of all, to tell time in the system, and it doesn't matter that the clock is imprecise. Like, you can think of it as, with every new block, it's like a new tick. It's like tick, 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 and every single tick, the state, like the ledger updates, and for every single tick, the system makes sure that no rules are broken. And so Bitcoin slows down time, builds up its own arrow of time in the digital realm, in the informational space. And everything that is, for example, in the mempool, everything that is not confirmed yet in the Bitcoin time chain is, from the point of view of Bitcoin, is timeless. It has no time. You can view miners as providing a timestamp service, so to speak, and providing this mechanism for peaceful conflict resolution. And you can see this also if you go back to the white paper. It's like, out of the 8 references or something, like 3 of them, or maybe more, or 5 of them, wherever, I don't remember the number from the top of my head, were about timestamping and the problem of timestamping. To have money, to have eCash, you need a ledger, and for ledger you need an absolute order, and for an absolute order you need timestamps, because A has to become before B and before C and so on. And so how Bitcoin does it? Now we can come to entropy. So it makes use of certain things in cryptography and in computer science that are just, as far as we can tell, truths of our universe again, of like truths of math, truths of how computers work, truths of the computational space. The thing about cryptographic hash functions is that they are called cryptographic because the space of possible outputs is so high that finding collisions is insanely hard. Like, for the stuff that Bitcoin uses, to build up an arrow of time that is made out of pure information, you have to use something that is irreversible, and you have to use something that is random. You have to use something that is random to go forward, and you have to use something that is irreversible to go back. And that's so Bitcoin had its genesis with block number 0, and then with the next tick was block number 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the clock, how it went. And everything is linked back to the past. So even with every block that is coming in, everything is linked to the previous block and to the previous one and to the previous one. So the whole integrity of the system links back to the genesis and can be very easily validated by everyone. And that's what every full node does. So you, by running a full node, automatically validate everything that ever happened in the Bitcoin world ever. The hash of the block header contains the hash of the previous blockhead, the hash of the previous blockhead. So just in this hash is all of the history is contained and more or less verified. So the future has to be uncertain, and the past has to be irreversible. And the irreversibility in Bitcoin comes from hash functions, because you can't reverse them. And the uncertainty comes from the network itself and from proof of work. And also the irreversibility comes, of course, from mining, The innovation of Bitcoin is unforgeable history. The important thing about Bitcoin, because money is a ledger, you have to build up this ledger of events that actually happened. And if you make it insanely costly to rewrite this ledger, you have history that cannot be argued with. You have unforgeable history. You cannot forge the history of Bitcoin a few blocks down. You just can't. Not even nation states can do it nowadays. It's Marty spoke about this as well on your pod, where it's you have to build ASIC foundries in secret, and produce a lot of energy and so on. Like every single new block in Bitcoin puts a new layer of amber around the past, around the whole history of the system. And so you cannot argue with what happened in Bitcoin. It builds up its own history of transactions, who owes what to whom, who owed what to whom, how did the transactions happen, and every single block puts a new layer of amber on top of it. And to create a new valid block that is accepted by the network, you need to do the proof of work. And the only way to do proof of work is by, guessing numbers, basically, because all you try to find is like a valid hash that is below a certain threshold and so on. And it's a random process that has no history in itself. It's like flipping a coin. It's like spinning a roulette wheel. There is no progress. That's why always the next block comes in 10 minutes from now. What the miners do is they're trying to find a random number, and you can visualize it as like rolling dice or flipping a coin. Rolling dice is an easier example to visualize. So every single miner is rolling a dice, and the dice is just very, very, very big. So there is no progress to solving this puzzle. You have to roll the dice, and then you have to see, did I win? If you didn't, you roll the dice again. And if some other miner wins, he goes Yahtzee, tells it to the whole network, and then you have to, roll the dice again, because now the number that you have to roll changes, and that's what's going on. To make updates to the ledger, to make updates to the network, you need to invest energy and, more importantly, time. Doing computations is not free in our universe. It requires energy. Flipping bits requires energy. And putting electrons into things so that they can flip bits requires time. And so this is how Bitcoin figures out how much time has passed in the real world. Like that's why people say, Bitcoin is this roundabout solution to the Oracle problem. The problem that you have is, and that's why I had this short little thread, and I gave a talk once where I conclude with, in Bitcoin the map is the territory, and in Bitcoin is the map is the territory, and by map I mean like your clay tablet, and you're putting lines for every sheep that comes home, and the territory are the actual sheep. If you write about something that happened in the world, you always have the split of map and territory, because the information itself is not the reality. History is written by the victors. And if you take a photograph of something, it's just a snapshot, and it's not like, the mountain might be gone. If you took a photograph of a mountain, it was a long time ago, or, like someone blew it up or what. Bitcoin is the only thing, difficulty adjusted proof of work is the only thing where you can look at the information and the information speaks for itself. The map is the territory. The information is the thing. And that's why also 12 words in your head are the actual thing. It is, for all intents and purposes, your Bitcoin. He calls it the reification of information. Because if you manage to do that, if you manage to build up a system that uses proof of work, and it uses proof of work in the smart, difficulty-adjusted way, so that information itself becomes a thing, you reify it, and then you can use it as if it was an object. And then suddenly, that's why we can use Bitcoin as if it was gold coins. But it's not actually gold coins. It's still just information. That's why you can teleport it. That's why you can send it at the speed of light. And that's why you can have it in your head, and so on. Mining and the proof of work and the building up the arrow of time and so on and so forth. It's impossible because of the Oracle problem. Like, computers do not know anything about the external world. Nothing. They cannot know anything about the external world. And it doesn't change if you put sensors on the computer. So every signal that comes as input into the computer can be faked. You cannot trust it. It's not trustless. You have to trust that the camera is actually, producing the right, and so on and so forth. That's the Oracle problem. You cannot. Computers have no way about telling anything about the external world. They can only tell something about their internal world, which is only computation. That's all computers can do. And so Bitcoin uses, it only looks at its internal world, so to speak. The only link that it has to the external world is the link of time. But it's like when a miner finds a new block, he also timestamps it with the real time in UTC, because time zones, fuck time zones, like UTC. And Bitcoin will accept this block if the timestamp is approximately right. It has to be like in several hours, like if the timestamp is off by more than like 3 hours or something, then the network will dismiss it. Bitcoin network does not use this wall time, the UTC time that we all know and love, to order blocks. It does not do that. That's why the wall time can be in reverse in Bitcoin. So you can have a block, and like 2 seconds later, 5 seconds later, a minute later, a new block comes in, and the new block it looks like it came from the past. It has an older wall time than the previous one. It doesn't matter for the Bitcoin network. It only matters that you have like an average of these timestamps, and so that the network uses this and trusts kind of this enough because it's distributed trust. Because you're too much, because the network will dismiss your block outright. And that's also where proof of work is important, because you actually invested real world assets in terms of energy and so on. So because proof of stake, for example, is the nothing at stake problem. Like you can just make stuff up. Yeah. With proof of work, you cannot make stuff up. And so if you put in work, you want to be rewarded for this work. Otherwise, you're uneconomical. The Bitcoin network does is it averages across these time spans, and this is enough to solve the Oracle problem. And it will figure out everything it needs to figure out. It will adjust the puzzle difficulty. That's all it does. But with that, it will figure out how many computers are working on me, how many computers are securing the Bitcoin network. China ban, for example, was a perfect example. 50% of the ASICs that were securing the Bitcoin network dropped off. Bitcoin noticed this and adjusted it downward. So it also knows, the switch from CPU to GPU to ASICs, because Bitcoin worked the same as it works now when just Satoshi was mining. You can think of it like a thermostat, but it's way more beautiful than that. But it is like a thermostat, and the thermostat can be very, very simple. It's very stupid, like I said before. It's amazingly simple, but it produces these very complex results. The problems it solves are so insanely complex. So we only mentioned now the problem of decentralized time, basically. But there is also, that was what Nick Szabo tried to solve, the problem of computational stability. Because you cannot know, because the computer does not know anything about the outside world, how fast the computers are. So you cannot create a computational problem or a mathematical problem where I can tell you with a guarantee it will take a computer like 2 minutes to solve, or 5 minutes to solve, or at least 10 minutes to solve. Like, that's impossible, because our computers get like 1 trillion times faster every time, and you don't know when the next breakthrough is coming. And so the difficulty adjustment solves that as well, because it doesn't matter if computers get faster. It adjusts for this. And this was a big problem with digital cash, because if you mine on a Commodore 64 and then you mine with a modern CPU, like, that's inflation. time doesn't exist for computers. Also, like how fast the computer is running, the computer itself doesn't know. That's why emulators work. That's why, like you just don't know from the perspective from the computer. The other things that proof of work solves is like fair distribution, how to distribute the tokens that will exist in the system fairly across the network. And that's why also time is important, because, and it's also something that Harry mentioned, Bitcoin's supply is fixed in time. That's why we know, like mining rewards will be given by the network until approximately the year 2140. And the issuance and the money, like how difficult it is to create the money, if it would be anchored to energy, it would be terrible, because then you take like 10 nuclear reactors and all the money is yours. So that doesn't work. Money that is tied to energy is a shitcoin, because if we get really good at making more energy, then we have money printers. And that's not what's happening with Bitcoin, because with Bitcoin, the energy consumption is not related to the monetary issuance. It's just related to the security of the network, and the issuance is done in time. Like it doesn't change how much Bitcoin is produced just because way more people are mining now. And these are all very, very, very hard problems to solve when it comes to digital cash, and we were unsolved before Bitcoin and before Satoshi's genius of putting it all together with the difficulty adjusted proof of work. And proof of stake has all these problems. That's why proof of stake fails with timestamping attacks, and that you can't do stake grinding. You cannot do a fair distribution of proof of stake coins by only using proof of stake. That's why they start with proof of work and then try to switch to proof of stake. That's why proof of stake is just trust me, bro. Because I made up this past. It's completely divorced from reality. Completely. Yeah. You've no proof. That this is what actually happened. You have a consortium of like 5 people, 12 people, doesn't matter. And they were like, yeah, we were there. Like we have the notes. It's like history. It can be a lie. With proof of work, what is so different? It is history, and you can verify that it actually happened. And it's proof of work. What it builds up, what Bitcoin builds up in terms of history, it's not a record of what happened. It is what actually happened. That's the difference. Wow. And that's why the map is the territory.